Hello again everyone. This update video will go over some important information that has been learned over the last few weeks and include more concrete recommendations when playing Grovekeeper. Beginning with our optimal choice of weapons, dual wielding is the best choice in every scenario. Dual wielding's faster attacks and causing our Wild Claw casts to have two separate damaging/critting opportunities per cast grants extreme value for our Primordial Earth talent. The damage output from these spirit procs, especially in AoE, outperforms the damage done from a two-hand weapon build almost by itself. Dual wielding also generally allows Grovekeepers to perform better when in the healer role for dungeons. More spirits means more healing, and the faster attack speed often means you should not fall too far behind in rage to use Hand of the Earth Mother. Also, as mentioned in my guide, having access to enchants and weapon stones or oils for two weapons is incredibly powerful. When it comes to determining which is better in terms of weapon speed, it is still currently debated and requires further testing. However, some early testing reveals that thanks to not only increasing our spirit procs, that our Neptune's Wrath ability, or equivalent support spell, is incredibly powerful with faster weapon speeds. Similarly to Primordial Earth, this 15-second window for on-hit damage shares a similar internal cooldown of around 0.25 seconds, meaning we want to squeeze in as many auto attacks and Wild Claws into the damage window as possible to take full advantage of it. The damage potential from extra spirit procs and the damage from Neptune's Wrath utilizing two fast weapons far outpaces the damage profile of using slower weapon speeds. For our stat priority and gearing choices, I have been doing some extensive theory crafting alongside some help of other Grovekeeper mains. However, before we go into more depth, the stat priority should look something like this. Hit to roughly 14 to 17%. Expertise to cap. Crit. Spell penetration. Strength/attack power. Agility. Armor penetration. Haste. Spell power. Don't forget that weapon damage upgrades are also extremely important. Now, for some further elaboration. Hit and expertise, especially with dual wielding, will almost always be a top priority. Firstly, we should always have at least 8% hit minimum to allow abilities like Wild Claw to never miss. Then reaching upwards of 14 to 17% hit is still extremely important to not only further reduce auto attack misses, but prevent our magic damage from being resisted. This is because the chance for a boss to resist our magic damage is also tied to our hit percent, capped at 17%. When in raid scenarios, we naturally gain hit percent from buffs and debuffs, usually up to 3 to 4% in most cases, which is why when gearing up for raiding, aiming for 14% is appropriate. Aiming for 17% should cover every other PvE scenario. For expertise, getting to cap is also highly important, but may be difficult to find on gear. With some clever gearing optimization, it's possible to cap, but when doing so, should not come at too great a cost to other stats. While 8% hit stops most abilities from missing, being under expertise cap will allow targets to still dodge or parry them. Getting hit and expertise to these benchmarks gives us our best chance to maximize the damage from our spirit procs alongside the rest of our damage profile. After 17% hit, this only affects the hit chance of our auto attacks and becomes a very low priority. While it might seem counterintuitive, as more auto attacks landing could result in more crits, and as such more spirit procs, the investment competes too heavily with other important stats like crit rating, the stat that is fueling the spirits. As just mentioned, crit is our next best stat, primarily thanks to our Primordial Earth talent. The damage output from this talent while dual wielding speaks for itself, and as such, crit rating's priority needs no further explanation. Next, spell penetration is an interesting and important stat to take into account. Enemies that are higher level than you, which includes almost all bosses, at a baseline plus 3 levels, innately have extra resistances. This innate spell resist cannot be reduced by debuffs, such as our level 40 support talent, Douse, but on Ascension, can be overcome with spell penetration. Because the majority of our damage is magic, primarily from spirit procs, cutting through this innate resistance improves our damage greatly, and also helps against targets that may have abnormally higher resists than usual. On screen, you can see a couple of items that give a good chunk of spell penetration, alongside our best stat, crit, that may be perfect for Grovekeeper. Additionally, there are weapon oils that help with spell penetration, which may be considered if you need more. Next, strength continues to be our best primary stat. Attack power is still our go-to for damage scaling, and thanks to our ancient power talent, and if we take into consideration a 12% stats buff, 1 point of strength goes from 2 AP per point to 2.464 AP per strength. Additional attack power on items will continue to also be worth considering. Agility is our next best primary stat. While Grovekeeper does not gain attack power from agility, because crit is so powerful, the crit scaling we gain from agility makes it worth a lot for reasons already discussed. Armor penetration is unique because it's worth scales depending on our attack power and the armor of the target. This makes it hard to judge exactly how powerful the stat is. On screen is a screenshot of a dev post explaining how armor penetration works on Ascension. Essentially, when the target has more armor, the more effective armor penetration rating becomes. Then, with more attack power, the more we take advantage of the reduced armor. We will return to how to judge the worth of armor penetration when we get to stat weighting soon. We finally reach our lowest priority stats, haste, spell power, and intellect. Because we have so much haste baked into our toolkit already, and then some from raid buffs, the only thing haste really affects is the attack speed of auto attacks, where further increasing it comes with diminishing returns. For spell power, it becomes a lower priority stat mostly due to how powerful other stats are in comparison. However, if considering healing output, may be a slightly higher priority for stronger heals. Then, lastly, intellect only grants more mana, and spell crit. Due to the majority of our damage scaling from melee crit, and our spirit procs being unable to crit, intellect is almost useless, as we do not have mana problems. On screen is the current stat weighting I use, which is particularly useful when using the online tool bisbeer.com to plan your build. Keep in mind, this is only a rough estimation, and is a result of my own theory crafting. In reality, the weighting of each stat will shift between every fight, dungeon, target count, etc., and as such, is useful as a benchmark only. This weighting chart uses 1 point of attack power as a baseline to compare how powerful the other stats are compared to it. To touch further on armor penetration, if we use a medium armor target as a benchmark, the on-screen formula will determine its weighting. Otherwise, setting it to a static number helps keep it simple, even if it's a fluid number in practice. I also have some additional notes concerning our rotation and build while I was making this video. In my guide video, I brought up the importance of maintaining running on instinct stacks by using Primal Rush. If for any case, where using it would put you out of position for more than a second of melee combat, Primal Rush is not worth using. It is especially not worth using while under the effect of Neptune's Wrath, or equivalent ability, if you would be put out of position. Unless you are fighting a target with an enlarged hitbox or adjacent to a wall, you are better off staying in melee combat and performing your rotation. If you are your raid source of our 1-minute support buff, aka Neptune's Wrath, then your build may benefit by focusing more on stacking attack power. Neptune's Wrath scales exclusively from AP, and is also one of the single largest sources of damage across an entire raid composition. Foregoing some personal gain in other stats can increase the raid's total output greatly. For the current rating tier, a high crit-focused build performs relatively equal in comparison to a higher attack power build. However, when taking future tiers into consideration, the attack power build may be better. This is mainly due to the fact that future tiers feature single-target raid fights more frequently. Attack power builds are favored for single-target fights, whereas crit-focused builds perform better in cleave and AoE. This means that if you're focused on gearing for single-target, crit will be weighted lower than in my suggested stat weights. On an additional point that I see often brought up, do not use weapons with the same speed. This is because a big portion of our damage profile is built on abilities with internal cooldowns. If our auto attacks are synced due to having 2 weapons with the same speed, then anything that can proc from auto attacks such as Neptune's Wrath will get neutralized by the internal cooldown. Another example is our spirit proc. If both auto attacks crit, due to them critting at the exact same time, only one spirit will spawn because of Primordial Earth's internal cooldown. Finally, to round out the video, I will quickly touch on some talent choices and recommendations. To put simply, I was sleeping hard on Boulder Dash. In AoE, this provides an incredible amount of damage, even if it locks us out of doing other actions, mainly due to the fact that it can crit, allowing us to continue getting spirit procs while channeling. It also synergizes with the Protector of the Grove talent, allowing us to cast Boulder Dash more frequently. However, in fights with 3 or less targets, you're still better off not using it. In the comments of my guide, I corrected a mention in the video that stated our spiritual warrior talent can increase the damage of our spirit procs, but due to the fact that the spirit charge they cast cannot crit, it does not affect them. The only effective use for spirit charge remains as a repositioning tool, in particular if used when out of position after using a primal rush. If your focus is on healing, the elemental cascade and druid training talents may provide extra value. That's it for this video. Hopefully this updated information helps you out when playing Grovekeeper. As usual, if I missed anything or have any questions, leave a comment down below. If you are interested in joining the discussions on Discord, join the Conquest of Azeroth Discord, which you can find the link to under your Discord connections in your profile settings on the Ascension website. Then, get your Primalist role and navigate to the Primalist section. Thanks for watching.